Somewhere on this list is a science fiction film from 1987 that even the most obsessive collectors of 1980s genre cinema have never seen. It has two actors in it. One of them is Malcolm McDowell. It premiered at Cannes, disappeared for nearly 4 decades, and contains a final act twist so insane that the handful of people who've watched it can't stop talking about it and won't tell you what it is. You'll know it when we get there. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about the golden age of science fiction cinema. The films everyone remembers, Blade Runner, The Terminator, Aliens, E.T., are not the strangest films the decade made. They couldn't be. A blockbuster has to play to everyone, which means it can only get so weird. The genuinely deranged ideas, the wild swings, the visions too strange or too cheap for a studio to protect. Those went into films that played one weekend in 1985 and vanished, onto the bottom shelf of a video store that no longer exists. This is a list of 15 of them. We're counting up from the merely underseen to the films that have effectively been erased from the record. Every rung gets harder to find than the last. Let's dig. Number 15, Enemy Mine 1985. We begin at the shallow end, the least obscure film on this list, and the one most likely to provoke a flash of half-memory in viewers of a certain age. Wolfgang Petersen's Enemy Mine is a genuinely ambitious studio production that flopped hard enough on release to slide into the cultural margins, despite its considerable budget and serious thematic intentions. Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. play a human pilot and a reptilian Drac alien stranded together on a hostile planet, forced to overcome mutual hatred to survive. It is structurally Hell in the Pacific transplanted to deep space, a two-hander about enemies discovering shared humanity, except one of them is a hermaphroditic lizard who gives birth partway through the film. Gossett's performance under heavy prosthetics is remarkable, communicating an entire alien culture's dignity through a face that can barely move. The film cost a fortune, earned almost nothing, and has spent 40 years being quietly rediscovered by viewers who find its sincerity more affecting than its 1985 audience did. It's the gateway drug to this list. Everything from here gets stranger. Number 14, Night of the Comet, 1984. The most fun film on this list, and the one most likely to have an actual cult following rather than mere obscurity. Night of the Comet is a Valley Girl apocalypse comedy in which a passing comet turns most of humanity into red dust and the rest into zombies, leaving two San Fernando Valley sisters, both handy with automatic weapons, both more interested in shopping than survival, to navigate the end of the world with their hair intact. Director Tom Eberhardt made something genuinely original here, a post-apocalyptic film that is also a teen comedy that is also a sharp piece of 1980s consumer satire, shot through with a candy-colored visual sensibility that anticipates the aesthetic the decade would become famous for. The empty Los Angeles streets, bathed in red comet light, are genuinely eerie. The film influenced Buffy the Vampire Slayer directly. Joss Whedon has cited it, and its DNA runs through a generation of genre-savvy horror comedies. It's beloved by those who know it. It's just that not enough people know it. Number 13, The Quiet Earth, 1985. A New Zealand production of startling seriousness, The Quiet Earth is the finest Last Man on Earth film almost nobody has seen. Bruno Lawrence plays a scientist who wakes one morning to find himself apparently alone on the planet, every other human being simply gone, and whose subsequent psychological disintegration the film charts with an intelligence and emotional honesty that the premise rarely receives. The first act, in which Lawrence's character moves through an empty world testing the limits of his solitude, is among the most haunting depictions of true isolation in science fiction cinema. And then the film's final image, which will not be spoiled here, is one of the most genuinely awe-inspiring closing shots in the entire genre, a vision of cosmic strangeness that lingers for years after viewing. The Quiet Earth is the first film on this list that crosses from underseen cult item into genuine lost masterpiece. If you find it, watch it alone at night. It was made to be experienced that way. Number 12, The Hidden, 1987. The Hidden is the rare, obscure 80s sci-fi film that is also a genuinely great action movie, a buddy cop thriller in which one of the cops is a body-hopping alien parasite hunting another body-hopping alien parasite through Los Angeles. Kyle MacLachlan, fresh from Blue Velvet and a year before Twin Peaks, plays the alien Federal Bureau of Investigation agent with a specific quality of off-kilter politeness that makes the performance both funny and unsettling. The film's premise, an alien criminal who possesses human hosts and indulges in fast cars, loud music, and casual violence, allows for a kind of escalating mayhem that the film stages with real wit and surprising emotional depth. It was well reviewed on release and has maintained a devoted following among those who've seen it, but it never achieved the mainstream recognition its quality warranted. It is, frame for frame, one of the most purely entertaining films on this list, and the one most likely to convert a skeptic into a believer in the value of digging through the decade's forgotten shelves. Number 11, Brainstorm, 1983. Brainstorm carries the heaviest tragedy of any film on this list, and the tragedy is the reason it became obscure. Douglas Trumbull, the visual effects genius behind 2001, Close Encounters, and Blade Runner, directed this ambitious film about scientists who develop a device capable of recording and playing back human sensory experience, including eventually the experience of death itself. The film starred Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood. During production, Natalie Wood drowned off Catalina Island under circumstances that have never been fully explained, one of the most discussed celebrity deaths of the era. MGM considered shutting the production down entirely and collecting the insurance. Trumbull fought to finish the film using a combination of completed footage and creative restructuring. The result is a flawed, fascinating, visually extraordinary work whose troubled production and the cloud of Wood's death prevented it from ever finding its audience. Trumbull was so embittered by the experience that he effectively abandoned feature directing. Brainstorm is the sound of one of cinema's great visual artists being broken by the industry he'd transformed. Number 10, The Philadelphia Experiment, 1984. We're now entering the middle of the list, where the films get genuinely hard to find. The Philadelphia Experiment dramatizes the enduring conspiracy legend about a 1943 U.S. Navy experiment that supposedly rendered a destroyer invisible and accidentally tore a hole in time. The film follows two sailors who fall through that hole from 1943 into 1984, and the fish out of water time travel premise is handled with more sincerity and emotional weight than the B-movie concept might suggest. McPare plays the lead with genuine conviction, and the film's central romance, a man displaced from his own era falling for a woman in the present, gives the science fiction an unexpectedly tender core. Executive produced by John Carpenter, the film has the specific texture of mid-budget 1980s genre filmmaking at its most earnest. It's not a masterpiece, it's something more valuable to a list like this. A film that fully commits to its strange premise and earns a real emotional response from material that could easily have been disposable. Number 9, Cherry 2000, 1987. Cherry 2000 is one of the great, should have been a cult classics of the decade, a post-apocalyptic adventure that sat on the shelf for 2 years before receiving a barely there release. In a future where human relationships have become contractual and sterile, a man whose beloved sex robot companion breaks down hires a tough tracker, played by Melanie Griffith in one of her most charismatic performances, to venture into the lawless desert to find a replacement model. What sounds like exploitation trash is actually a surprisingly thoughtful, genuinely funny adventure film with a sneaky feminist undertow. The entire plot is a man learning that the real woman guiding him is infinitely more valuable than the perfect robot he's chasing. The desert action sequences are imaginative, the production design is wonderfully strange, and Griffith is magnetic. Orion Pictures had no idea what to do with it. It found its audience decades later on cable and home video, among viewers delighted to discover a film this odd and this charming had been hiding in plain sight. Number 8, Trancers, 1984. Trancers is the purest distillation of a very specific 1980s phenomenon, the Charles Band Empire Pictures B-movie, made fast and cheap and with more imagination than budget. Tim Thomerson plays Jack Death, a hard-boiled future cop with one of the great B-movie names in history, sent back in time to 1980s Los Angeles to stop a villain who can turn weak-willed people into zombie-like trancers. It is, transparently, a low-budget Blade Runner meets Terminator riff, and it is enormously entertaining precisely because it knows exactly what it is. Thomerson's deadpan noir narration, a young Helen Hunt in an early role, and a watch that slows time to 1/10 speed for 10 seconds at a stretch. The film deploys its limited resources with genuine cleverness. It spawned 5 sequels, which is its own kind of immortality, but the original remains a perfect example of what a talented team could do with nothing. This is the heartland of video store C. The film you rented because the cover looked cool and were delighted to discover was actually good. Number 7, The Brother from Another Planet, 1984. John Sayles, one of American independent cinema's most respected writer-directors, made this extraordinary film for almost no money, and it remains one of the most original science fiction films of the decade. Joe Morton plays a mute alien who crash lands in New York and, being a black man in appearance, moves through Harlem as an escaped slave from another world, pursued by alien bounty hunters in the form of men in black-style white agents. The film uses its science fiction premise as a lens for an extraordinarily perceptive examination of race, immigration, and belonging in 1980s America. Morton's performance is entirely silent and entirely riveting. He communicates an entire inner life through expression alone. The film is funny, strange, politically sharp, and deeply humane. It's the most critically respected film on this list and, paradoxically, one of the least seen, because it exists in the gap between the art house audience that didn't think to look for science fiction and the genre audience that didn't think to look for John Sayles. Number 6. Time Rider, The Adventure of Lyle Swan, 1982. Co-written and produced by Michael Nesmith, yes, that Michael Nesmith of the Monkees, who used his inheritance and his music video, Pioneering Instincts, to fund a string of strange projects. Time Rider is a genuine oddity, a time travel western in which a motocross racer accidentally rides his dirt bike through a scientific experiment and ends up in the American Old West of 1877. The fish out of water premise, a modern motorcyclist with modern technology dropped among 19th century outlaws, is played mostly straight, with a wonderfully strange paradox at its core involving the racer's own ancestry. Fred Ward plays the lead with rugged charm. The film has the loose, sun-baked texture of early 80s low-budget American filmmaking, and Nesmith's involvement gives it an unexpected musical and tonal sensibility. It's the kind of film that exists because one eccentric rich man wanted it to exist, and the world is slightly better for his eccentricity. Almost nobody has seen it. It deserves a small devoted rediscovery. Number 5. Space Hunter. Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, 1983. Now we're getting into genuinely deep cuts. Space Hunter was a big swing, a 3D post-apocalyptic adventure released at the height of the early 80s 3D revival, starring Peter Strauss as a roguish bounty hunter searching a plague-ravaged planet for 3 kidnapped women, with a young Molly Ringwald a year before she became the face of John Hughes' universe as his scavenger sidekick. Michael Ironside plays the villain, Overdog, with magnificent menace. The film is a Star Wars meets Mad Max adventure with imaginative production design, genuine scope, and the specific visual gimmickry of a film designed to throw things at the audience in 3 dimensions. It cost a lot of money and earned very little, and the collapse of the 3D fad took it down with it. Seen flat, on home video, it loses the gimmick but reveals a genuinely fun, well-crafted adventure film that has been almost entirely forgotten, partly because its biggest selling point, the 3D, became impossible to experience as intended for decades. Number 4. Arena, 1989. Arena is the film for anyone who ever wanted Rocky in space, played completely straight. Set on a space station where alien species compete in a galactic boxing tournament, the film follows a human underdog, the first of his species to compete in generations, as he fights his way up the rankings against a menagerie of imaginatively designed alien opponents. This is an Empire Pictures full moon production, which means the creature effects are the entire point, and they are genuinely excellent. Full-body alien fighters, built and operated practically, brawling in a ring. The film commits to its absurd premise with total sincerity, treating a story about interspecies prize fighting with the earnest dramatic weight of a sports underdog narrative. It barely received a release, drifted onto video, and has been seen by almost no one. For aficionados of practical creature effects and gloriously committed B-movie filmmaking, it is a genuine buried treasure, the kind of film that makes digging through this decade's margins worthwhile. Number 3. Radioactive Dreams, 1985. We're now in the territory of true obscurity, films that even dedicated genre obsessives struggle to find. Radioactive Dreams is one of the strangest films of the entire decade, a post-apocalyptic musical comedy noir in which 2 young men, raised in a fallout shelter their entire lives on a diet of nothing but hard-boiled detective novels, emerge into the nuclear wasteland talking and behaving like 1940s film noir Private Eyes. Directed by Albert Pune, a filmmaker whose chaotic, prolific, genuinely visionary low-budget career is its own rabbit hole, the film mashes together Mad Max, Raymond Chandler, and an actual rock musical into something that should not work and frequently doesn't and is, in its failures as much as its successes, completely unlike anything else. The tonal whiplash is extraordinary. The ambition wildly exceeds the budget. It is a genuine cult oddity that has been almost impossible to see in a decent version for most of its existence, drifting through the worst possible video transfers and out-of-print obscurity. For connoisseurs of the gloriously strange, it's a holy grail. Number 2, The Lathe of Heaven, 1980. The penultimate entry is, by some distance, the most artistically significant lost film on this list, and for decades it was almost literally impossible to see. The Lathe of Heaven is a PBS television production, the first major American TV movie produced by a public broadcaster adapted from Ursula K. Le Guin's masterful novel about a man whose dreams literally reshape reality. He dreams of peace and wakes to find his dream has rewritten the world. But every alteration carries monstrous unintended consequences, and the psychiatrist who discovers his ability begins exploiting it to remake the world according to his own designs. He dreams an end to overpopulation and wakes into a world where a plague has killed billions. He dreams an end to racial conflict and wakes into a world where everyone has turned the same shade of gray. Each well-intentioned dream is a horror. The film is faithful, intelligent, and genuinely unsettling, with Le Guin herself closely involved in the adaptation, a rare case of a major science fiction author sanctioning and shaping a screen version of her own work. And then it vanished, tangled in music rights issues, reportedly including a Beatles song used in the production that kept it off the air and out of distribution for decades. An entire generation of science fiction readers knew The Lathe of Heaven existed as a film but could never see it. A phantom passed between fans as a rumor, occasionally glimpsed on a degraded bootleg tape of a tape of a tape. It was finally cleared for re-release in 2000, but its years in the void earned it a place near the very top of any list of the decade's most genuinely obscure science fiction. It is proof that obscurity is sometimes not a measure of quality at all, but an accident of paperwork. Number 1. The Caller, 1987. And here, at the bottom of the deepest shelf, is the most obscure film on this list, a movie that even the most committed students of 1980s genre cinema frequently discover they have never managed to see. The Caller is a two-person film. There are only two actors in it, Malcolm McDowell and Madeline Smith Osborne. The entire film, for most of its running time, consists of a single premise. A man whose car has broken down arrives at a remote cabin in the woods where a woman lives alone, asking to use her telephone, and the escalating, deeply uneasy psychological game that unfolds between them. Both characters seem to know things they shouldn't. Both seem to be lying. The audience cannot determine which of them is the threat, or whether either of them is what they appear to be. And then, in the final act, the Caller does something that almost no one sees coming. It abruptly reveals itself to be science fiction. The psychological thriller you thought you were watching detonates into a genre swerve so unexpected, so completely from out of left field, that it has become the film's entire legend among the small number of people who've experienced it. This was an Empire Pictures production, Charles and Albert Band's B movie factory, shot in Italy, with practical effects work in its climactic reveal by the great creature effects artist John Carl Buechler. It premiered at the Cannes Film Market in 1987, received a barely there home video release in 1989, and then disappeared almost completely. McDowell and Osborne are both genuinely excellent, the tension is masterfully sustained, and the ending is the kind of jaw-dropping nonsense that you either love or hate, but absolutely never forget. The Caller is the perfect film to end this list because it embodies everything that makes obscure 1980s science fiction worth seeking out. It's strange, it's ambitious beyond its means, it commits totally to an insane idea, and it was buried so thoroughly by bad distribution that finding it feels like uncovering a genuine secret. Richard Band's minimal, eerie score, brother to Charles, son of the same B-movie dynasty that produced half the films in the lower reaches of this list, does extraordinary work sustaining dread across what is essentially a filmed two-character play. Director Arthur Allen Seidelman came mostly from television, and the stage-bound intimacy of the film is part of its strange power. You genuinely believe there is no one else in the world but these two people circling each other in the dark, each waiting for the other to reveal what they actually are. It has, in recent years, begun streaming on free platforms, which means, for the first time in nearly 4 decades, the most obscure film on this list is finally findable. Watch it before you read anything else about it. The less you know going in, the better. 15 films, 1 decade, and a single shared truth. The most famous science fiction of the 1980s is not the same thing as the most interesting. The blockbusters earned their immortality, but the margins of the decade are where the genuine weirdness lived. The films too strange for the studios, too cheap for prestige, too poorly distributed to survive, and too genuinely original to deserve the obscurity that swallowed them. Every film on this list is a small act of rebellion against the idea that the canon is closed. The classics will always be there. These won't be, unless someone goes looking. The question this list leaves for the comments is this: how many genuinely great films have disappeared entirely? Not merely obscure like these 15, but gone, lost to bad video transfers and expired rights and warehouses that were emptied without anyone checking what was inside. And of the films you love most, how many did you only find by accident? Tell me the obscure 80s sci-fi film you'd add to this list, the one you're amazed nobody else has seen.